Hi, folks. I'm Fred McMurray, along with Ray Pillar and Jim Treleaven. We're back again for another episode of Pillar's Principles. Today's topic is how will I set up the legal structure of my business? You can go out and be a sole proprietorship with no legal structure, and that means sucker because
Yeah.
you can lose everything. Ray, how did you go about deciding the legal structure for your business?
Well, in a previous episode, we talked about the path of least resistance and not being particularly astute in these matters. I did some brief research, and it appeared to me that an S corp was the right way for me to go with the path of least resistance and the least amount of cost in my startup costs. So I took the S corp route and still am an S corp, and I'm happy with it.
So, what about the S corp? I mean, there's S corps, there are LLC, there's C corps, and probably a couple of other weirder ones. What was it about the S corp that made you say that's the one for me?
Well, some of it had to do with my 401k too. I don't recall all the particulars in it because that was a long time ago, but it was easy for me to pull money out of my 401k uh, to help with the starting of the business. So yeah, that seemed to make it the easiest thing. And since I was a sole proprietor, my wife was my partner, of course, but still as a sole proprietor, it was just the easiest path to take. And I think here again, I'm going to let Jim talk on this because he's pretty much the expert on it as opposed to I.
All right. So just as a reiteration, for you, one of the main reasons you picked the S corp was so you could roll 401k money into it.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, you made the decision on the type of legal structure based on an earlier question in an earlier episode of how am I going to fund this?
Yes.
Fair enough. Jim, your thoughts?
Okay, so the big three are S corps, LLCs, and C corps, and it actually can become pretty complex because there are C corps that can be taxed the same way as the others, believe it or not. But the advantage of, in general, startups that are intending to take in outside money, the LLC is the easiest way to do that. S corps are a little more difficult. C corps are okay for that, but the advantage of the LLC is just what the name says, limited liability. They are pass-through tax entities, which has a real advantage as well. But the structure of an LLC does allow for investors to come in from the outside, and the structure does facilitate that. In an LLC, there are members and managers. Pretty straightforward to think about the managers as like sort of the board of directors or the officers, and the members are the investors. And the structure is pretty straightforward. And there is, it's a tax, as I said, it's a pass-through tax entity, which has advantages for certain people. And it also does have limited liability, which is a real advantage as well.
Yes.
That's not to say that C corps are not useful, and there are structures for C corps that allow for similar tax structures, but it's a little more complicated. And S's have that as well. So it depends. I think the most common structure now for startups is LLCs.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but with a C corp, you pay taxes on your corporation and also your taxes, your personal taxes. But with an S corp, it's the taxes flow through to your personal, and you're only paying one tax. Is that how
That
that?
is true. That's true for LLCs also.
Okay.
But you can set up C corps, and I have seen it. I don't know the details of it actually, but you're right. C corps, the corporation pays a tax, and then
So you're paying two taxes.
you are.
Yeah.
Although you don't the corporation pays the tax, and then you don't have to pay it at the same time
Oh.
as a shareholder. So it becomes complicated.
Yeah.
And unwinding it at the end of the day also becomes very complicated. And I've seen cases where, tax accountants can make millions of dollars of difference in figuring out how to do it correctly. So
this is where we recommend to our audience that hire a good attorney and hire a good tax person.
So
I've seen multi-million-dollar differences from right advisors.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for Ray for saying that, because that was something I was going to say. But I guess what I want to ask is, so with the C Corp, I was always told that you have to file like yearly paperwork besides the taxes with the feds, and there's a whole lot more paperwork that you have to do with a C Corp than you do with either an S Corp or an LLC. Is my understanding right, wrong?
I think generally that's true. But both C Corps and LLCs have to have, quote, representatives. And the filing, for simple structure, C Corps is not that much more complicated than an LLC. And you can do your own filings for the LLC as well. So it doesn't have to be a lot more complicated, but eventually it will become more complicated.
So as a startup, why would I pick a C Corp?
I would say almost never.
So then, in the term where I would pick a C Corp, why? Why would I pick a C Corp?
If your startup is, think of yourself as a Silicon Valley startup where you're going to take in a lot of money, then yes, you would do that. Because taking in a ton of money into a C is easier than either of the other structures. But there's NVIDIA and other examples of where that would happen. So I think that's the case there. But for that's being geographically biased or something, if you're sort of traditional Midwest-based startup, even if it's, a tech startup with a lot of plans to be the next unicorn, then I think an LLC, but you start as an LLC and you can always convert later. So,
all right. So
how often can you change your corporate designation?
What's that?
How often can you change from an LLC to a C or an S?
Well, I mean, if you're going to change from an LLC to a C, you do it once.
Okay, you can do it once. That's right. Yeah.
So from what I'm hearing, about the only reason as a startup to be a C Corp is if I've got a large amount of investors. Because when you say large amounts of money, I'm assuming you're talking about a large number of investors rather than one or two investors who bring in a good chunk of change.
It could be both. Generally, it's institutional investors will drive the answer to that.
Okay. So in other words, if I've got somebody that's investing in it and it's a person, odds are I'm going with an LLC or maybe a S Corp. If I've got the Bank of California, whatever that would be, going to invest, then I want a C Corp.
Well, yes, not generally a bank, but that's
You said
venture
large
capital firm or a private equity firm.
private
Absolutely.
equity firm. Okay, so if I got private equity coming in a firm, then I really want a C corp. Potentially.
Generally, yes, for sure. Because remember, private equity firms view themselves as, in most cases, not always, but they're investing as though they were a shareholder, but they're buying the company. So
Okay, so these are the examples like that is a startup with a brand new, I'm going to say idea, as we've talked in other episodes. If, however, I'm buying a Molly Maid, buying a franchise, doing something that's already been done, not a new idea, am I better off going with an LLC or a S corp rather than a C corp? Ray?
I would say so, yes. And probably your franchise would recommend that route as well.
right.
Okay. So
That is a question for Ray, yes.
Yeah.
since when you were looking, when you started yours, when you bought yours, what made you decide against the C corp?
Well, as I indicated earlier, is that it seemed to be more complicated, so a lot more involved in it. And at the time, the path of least resistance. Which way can I go with and get this thing going and start producing as quickly as possible?
I prefer calling that the shortest time to revenue, but
Well,
Any last thoughts, Ray, on legal structures for businesses?
Start asking questions when you're looking into this and getting ideas. Which is the best route, and don't wallow in it too long, because pick one and go with it, and so you can move forward, because there's so many other things you need to think about.
yep. I think that's good advice. And your earlier advice too, Fred, of talk to a lawyer and an accountant.
Oh yeah.
is always important.
Mhm.
So, folks, two other people you could talk to is Jim or Ray. To them, reach out through the website, kfred.com, and we'll get you connected to Jim or Ray. I'm Fred McMurray with Ray Pillar and Jim Treleaven. This has been another episode of Pillar's Principles. What type of business structure do I need to have for my company? Have a great day, folks.